Welcome to Bad Dog Agility, a podcast helping you reach all of your dog agility goals. Whether it's competing under the bright lights of the televised finals at Westminster or successfully navigating a homemade course in your own backyard, we'll bring you training tips, interviews, and news about the great sport of dog agility. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
The show starts with your hosts, Jennifer, Esteban, and Sarah.
I'm Jennifer.
I'm Esteban.
And I'm Sarah, and this is episode 326. Today's podcast is brought to you by hitaboard.com and the new Teeter Teach It, an easy-to-use tool that controls the amount of tip on your teeter so you can introduce motion to your dog in a gradual way. Go to hitaboard.com for the new Teeter Teach It and other training tools and toys. Use discount code BDA10 to get 10% off your order. That's hitaboard.com. Today, we are very excited to be joined on the podcast by Perry DeWitt. Welcome to the podcast, Perry.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on.
And I really should say welcome back because we recently had you on the podcast after AKC Nationals, where you won with your dog Wit. And then now we have to have you back on because you are having one of the most dominant seasons and specifically one of the most dominant falls I have ever seen in my life in agility. And so we want to talk a little bit about your fall and your results, but we also want to kind of jump in and dive deep into some training aspects and some things that are very unique to your situation with the dogs that you're running. But let's just take a moment and talk about, I guess what you've been doing this fall. So the last time I saw you live, we were both in the Czech Republic and you were and that was the Agility World Championship. And then since then, we've had the UKI US Open. We've had the announcement of the World Agility Open team. And we've had the EO Tryouts for Team USA. So the AKC European Open team. So can you tell us a little bit about everything that went on in those events?
Sure. So my dogs were very good. I felt like it was both of those weekends, for the most part, were weekends where things happened, like went as planned. Agility is always unpredictable, but sometimes you have a weekend where you feel like you're really on and your dog's really off, or your dog's really on and you're really off. And I felt, especially for Jenny, both of those weekends were felt exceptional for her. I felt, I did well also, but I felt like she went to another level of just being so on point and so with me and just seemingly more grown up than she ever has felt before.
And how old is Jenny?
She's 3 and almost a half.
Oh my goodness. You've got some great times ahead of you.
I hope so. She's really come along, especially in the last 6 months. I feel like she's, I keep saying, I feel like she just not finally, but I feel like she really figured it out, the whole point of agility and how to balance her focus on me and the obstacles. And it seemed sudden, and all of a sudden she's just doing it. It's really cool. And Wit is a different, kind of a different dog. And he's always been really good in practice and really smart and really learned fast and never overthought things and just was very, very not easy, but kind of easy. And then a little bit unpredictable in shows. He'd always do something I didn't expect, where Jenny's always been very predictably having the same, if she has an issue, it'll show up in practice and at a trial. And it's not like I'm ever shocked by anything she does, where he is kind of the opposite, where he's always been really good. And then he'll do something where I'm like, oh my God, where did that come from? And he's just, as he's gotten older, that's happened less and less and less. And at the Open, it's hard to even remember, but he was amazing. I felt like he had one bar and we had one little refusal that was my fault. And he was so perfect. It was it felt like, in a way, it felt like they both kind of grew up. He's 6 and she's 3, but that's kind of the different dogs, different journeys. But at EO Tryouts, like I said, I felt like Jenny really was really on point and way better than I expected, especially doing the switching jump heights from 20 to 24. And he did really well also, but not as well as he did at the Open, and I think mostly due to the surface. He's just so amazing on natural surface like dirt and grass, and definitely noticed a difference with him on anything other than like the best turf ever, where Jenny doesn't have any of that. So I felt I could feel a difference between him and at the Open and EO tryouts, but for the most part, they really both just were on, which was cool. I never felt like any disappointments or any shocks or anything like that where they were not anything other than pretty much their best selves. So it was really cool.
Yeah. So at the US Open, you were running Jenny in the 500 class, which is 20 inches essentially, right?
Yeah.
And then Whit in the 600 class, which is like 24 inches. And based on those runs at the US Open, they both earned win-on spots onto the Team USA for the World Agility Open, right?
Correct. Yes.
So you get to go with 2 dogs, 2 heights.
Yeah.
And compete. I'm sure that will not be hectic at all.
Yeah, 5 days with 2 dogs. It'll be fun. It'll be exciting, but it'll be a lot.
Right. And when is that event? The WAO?
That's mid-May.
So 2 dogs, 2 different heights, winning spots at the US Open for the World Agility Open. Then you turn around and you go to the EO team tryouts. And this was just a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago. And Jenny comes out and wins 3 of 4 rounds and earns her spot onto the EO team, correct?
Correct.
So like you were saying, she's such a young dog. So that was amazing. But Whit also won onto the EO team, right?
Correct. Yes.
So now you have qualified both of them for a whole other international competition. But in this case, they're now at the same height.
Yes, correct.
And I just want to note how impressive this is for people who don't understand the format. So at the US Open, they only have 1 win-on spot for 500 and 1 win-on spot for 600. So it's not like Jenny and Whit were 2 of multiple dogs. Like Perry took the spots, like she took them at the US Open. And then we go over to EOTT and it was the same thing. There's 2 spots. There's only 2 win-on spots handed out and you snagged them both. Like that's what's so impressive to me. It's not like, oh, half the team wins on and you're in the mix. I mean, you're dominating. You are taking the win-on spots in those classes across those events. So super, super impressive and very, very fun to watch.
Oh, thank you. Like I said, I was not surprised. Well, I was surprised. I was pleasantly surprised by their performances. So
yeah, cool. It was absolutely amazing. And then, of course, you and Jessica Ajoux are partners, like in life. And she also goes out and has some amazing runs with Hallelujah. So between the 2 of you, you were just like snagging team spots left and right and wins left and right and all of that. It's just like one of the most amazing duos that I've ever seen. So why don't you talk a minute about training with your spouse? Because I do that sometimes. and it's not always the easiest, although right. Sometimes it's joy and wonderful. But how is it training together for the 2 of you?
I think how you just like kind of described it. It's very up and down. I think there's things about it that are really awesome, and I think there's things about it that are really hard. The training part I think is easier than the competing part. Like there's definitely hard things about training together, but I think for the most part we like Jess always says, like if one of we don't let the other one train without us. So if one of us is feeling lazy and the other one's not, then it ends up being that we're both training, and so we kind of keep each other motivated and like active in training that way. So like there's never a time to really be lazy. Of course that when we are training, there's things we don't always agree on, and sometimes we can be hard-headed about things, but ultimately I think we always come back around and benefit from each other's knowledge and experiences and stuff like that. Competing, I think, is much, much harder, just because there's so many emotions that go into it. And I mean, sometimes we're both doing really well, but often one of us, especially run to run, is doing better than the other. And so it's like, you're so disappointed about your run and you're trying to be happy for your partner, but then you're also jealous. And it's like just a mix of emotion that's really kind of hard to manage. But we're working on it. And I talked to my therapist about it, and we're dealing with it. And it's, I think in the grand scheme, it's a very good thing. I think it makes us better because we are both very competitive, and we are competing against one another. And even if we're just at a local AKC trial, we still are competing against one another. So there's always going to be somebody there who is, that can beat you. So there's never like, and I'm not nearly as focused at a local trial as I am at a big event, but I still want to win, and she still wants to win. And so we're still competing against, one of our biggest competitors all the time. And like I said, having to deal with emotions and the stress and all that. But I think there's pros and cons, but ultimately it's really awesome. And we're really lucky that we get to compete, and really lucky that we get to train together, and that we have dogs related, and that we know each other's dogs and we can help each other. So it's overall a very good thing, just not always easy.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I'm wondering about how things go down when you're at a trial and you guys are having disagreement on how to run a particular part of a course. So maybe where one of you feels strongly you want to run it one way, and then the other one wants to do something else. And then, of course, you're going to get an answer, right? You each run it your own way. Let's say you kind of split test it and you each do your own thing. And one of you, it goes well, and one of it goes like very poorly. Like, does that happen very often? Or is there a lot of agreement? Or is there like what is the dynamic like, more specifically with tough parts of the course where you don't really see eye to eye? Or does one of you typically, you're like, okay, we're going to both agree to do this, even though I kind of disagree. And then, of course, if you're the one who kind of disagrees and then it doesn't go well, you're like, I shouldn't have agreed with you. Like, do you have that kind of dynamic?
We don't really have that much. I feel like we have a little bit of that before we run. Like especially for me, like if I walk a course and I'm like, oh, I know how to do this, I'm going to do it this way. And then she says something that's totally different than how I was picturing it. I might, like, in the moment be like feeling I don't know if defensive is the right word, but like, oh, am I seeing it wrong? Or like, why would she want to do it that way? Or like that.
Right. Right.
Whatever. Yeah. And then I think ultimately and vice versa, having those discussions make us look at it differently. And then we kind of both can come and say, okay, well, maybe actually the right answer is this, or we're not really sure. And then, sometimes if we're both running multiple dogs, we might, try to make the best guess. And then if it doesn't go well, we kind of know like, okay, well, power doesn't really turn as well out of tunnels. And so it didn't work for her, but it probably could still work for Lou, but it might not work for Whit because he runs more like her or something like that. So we can kind of use the information about what we've tried with that particular dog to help decide what to do with a different dog. But for the most part, we don't disagree a lot. I think I think there's places like she'll tend to do a rear more than I will. And that's just because it's a skill that's not my strongest. So it's not like I think it's wrong to do it. She just feels more comfortable to do it. And there's, I think things that I feel more confident in than some of her stuff. But for the most part, I think we agree we agree largely on dog path and dog lines and that kind of thing. And it's, and more just starts to become trial and error after that.
Right. So compared to 3 years ago, I'm just going to pull an arbitrary time span out of my head. So compared to 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, would you say that you agree more than you did 2 or 3 years ago? Like when you're looking at a course, have you grown like you guys are just like really in sync with how you view courses and you're running them? Or you feel like, have you diverged a little, or is it about the same?
I think it's probably about the same. I think we're really kind of, which is really awesome. We're really kind of on the same page about a lot of that stuff. So we've learned from each other a lot. So like when one of us isn't sure, we can ask the other and vice versa. So, sometimes the plan that we never like, we're not deciding that we're going to do this plan. Like we do our own plans, but often we do pick the same plans. But I think like maybe in certain situations, I'm more comfortable with the plan that we have decided is probably the best way to do it. And we've both gotten better at the things that we weren't as good at. And I've taught her some things and she's taught me some things. So I think we've grown in our ability to decide and to pick and to know what to do. But I think in terms of agreeing, it's probably the same.
I mean, it's pretty clear that you guys, have a really good dynamic in the way you, I guess, resolve, not conflict. I don't think conflict's the right word, but maybe a disagreement.
Differences of opinion.
Well, have you ever required a third person, a third trainer or a friend to come in, arbitrate in a particularly heated discussion about X, Y, or Z that's related to agility?
I think we have close friends that we do agility with that we'll discuss also with. It's not like we're only going to discuss with each other. Mm-hmm. And so if our our agility peers are there, we'll discuss with them as well and kind of bounce ideas back and forth. But we rarely get heated about how to handle. Mm-hmm. It's usually more like emotions after runs that we might say something stupid or have like just an emotional moment about whatever might have happened. And sometimes sometimes it can be about, now that I'm thinking about it, like it could be like if I'm suggesting something that she ends up doing or vice versa, and then it doesn't go well, we could say something like, I shouldn't have done that, where it's like, are you saying that because I told you to do that? Or
right.
That? Or yeah. So it's like, but that I think is just all like the normal amount of disappointment, and whoever is the first person you talk to after is going to get your sometimes I shouldn't have said that moment, which happens to often be one of us, and we have also just run, so it's kind of I think that's where it's hardest. It's after.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I think this is really helpful, especially for beginners to hear, because I think a lot of people, when they first come into the sport, kind of have the mindset of they're going to try and figure it out themselves. And certainly there's a pleasure in kind of figuring out the course. It's a little bit like a puzzle. I remember you were telling us about the guy who does the course maps, right? He tries to figure out the max amount of points for what game is that?
For fast. Yeah, that was our podcast on the Agility Course Maps Facebook group. And they were saying that one of the people waits all week for the maps to be posted from the weekend. And then he goes and figures out what path he could do to get the maximum number of...
So like a New York Times crossword puzzle almost, right?
Yeah.
But I think at very high levels, and I think in a lot of the sport, you have people who are getting together, and I think that's where you have so much growth and so much support and so much building community in the sport, when everyone's bouncing ideas off of each other before and after the course. You analyze before, and then you have that post-run analysis, as opposed to just showing up, doing it all on your own, running your course, and then feeling good or bad based on those results, and not really interacting with other people around that course. Jen?
I don't have a spouse that does agility, but listening to Perry talk is to a T, like almost uncanny to a T, describing the relationship that I have with my best friend, Abby. We both have, 12 and 16s. So we stay away from the 20 and 24s. We don't want to go up against Perry and Jess. And clearly we already know they're dominating, but everything you're describing is so on point about the discussions on handling and even just dog training when we train together. And generally we're on the same same style, same opinion of things, and she'll train and then I'll be guilted into training, or I'll be like, I'm training, you want to come over? And she's like, okay, I'll be there shortly. And then the emotions after are always kind of harder. We've had situations where, on one day we're teammates and we are teaming up together. And then the very next day we're competing against each other. And we've had some events where we've gone head to head, and it's hard. AKC Nationals a couple of years ago, it's tough in the 12-inch class, but then, it's great at Westminster. She did 12 and I did 16. So I think there's a lot of parallels about what you're discussing with training partners and training buddies as well. And as you were talking, the other thing that kind of really related to me is at the Purina in St. Louis, the Purina site, they have banners along the wall, and there is one that has a quote, and I don't remember it exactly. I was trying to recall it, but basically alluding to the fact that when you surround yourself by excellence, everybody gains, right? Everybody grows together. And the first time I saw it, I was like, I cannot like think how true that is, because some of the best teams, and I guess when I think teams, I mean teams as in one handler and one dog, but also teams as in clubs and groups, are groups of people that push each other to grow and get better. And I think of United Dog and what you guys have done over there with Perry and Jess and Emily and all of you guys, and like what we've really tried to do in the state of Ohio. We have a lot of really, really great handlers and trainers in Ohio, and you do go to those local shows. And while you might not be as focused, the fact that at a local show we'll have fun and we'll be, Abby and I will be pushing and going for high scoring Sheltie. Like, it means nothing except that like the club hands out a little ribbon and a dog bowl, but we'll push each other. And I really do think that in the big picture, while it is sometimes hard, it has made us both better. So it's kind of leaning into your training buddies and your training partners and knowing that there's that balance of, yes, we're great friends, we're training buddies, but we also can kind of push each other and challenge each other to be better. So there were so many parallels across what you were mentioning that I can completely relate to.
Yeah, that's cool. I have seen you and Abby and thought that you were some of the only people that could relate to. I'm sure there's lots of training partners and spouses that do agility you guys can relate to, but it's awesome. It's just hard.
It's awesomely hard.
I 100% agree.
No comment.
All right. Well, one of the things that I also wanted to talk about that's very specific to your situation is going back and forth between jump heights, specifically for Jenny. So I guess there's kind of a couple of different questions here. One is like, how do you deal with going between Jenny and Whit when they're at different heights? But then also Jenny herself has to run in different heights in different venues. So how do you manage that? What do you do in training? What height do you do in training? That kind of thing.
Wait, I want to put that into the context of the US Open, because I had the privilege of providing the live stream commentary for the finals each night at the US Open. So I was in Florida. I saw you run in person. You had a phenomenal week. And so I know, and there's been discussion about it, and blogged about it in the Wednesday wrap-up, but the courses were big. They were much bigger than I was expecting to see in the final, certainly, right? And you're talking about running multiple dogs in different heights. And so if you could answer Sarah's questions, but also in the context of the US Open, like, what was that experience like? Were there changes or adjustments that you had to make compared to the local trials? And like, how is that all playing out with two different dogs, two different heights? Pros and cons.
Let's see. So, I mean, the Open was, the courses were huge. Some of them were really, really big. Mm-hmm. The other thing about the Open is often I was running my two different heights and two different rings, and the courses are not built exactly the same. So, they're trying, but there's always going to be like little differences. And so it's not just a different height and a different dog, but a different angle or a different spacing or whatever it might be. So I think I didn't really have any trouble with that. And I'm trying to think, I think mainly because I'm the type of handler and person that's not like attached to, like, it's not that I am attached to a plan. Like, I'm never going out there and winging something where I'm like, oh, I'll just do a rear if I'm behind and do a blind if I'm in front. I'm always having a plan and committing to it, but I'm able to be like kind of in the moment and react and give information when they need it. So I'm not like thinking, okay, I'm going to do my front cross when I get here. It's like, I'm trying to just give information when the dogs need it and trying to stay connected. And I think because that's my general style and my general, like, my main focus is give information when they need it, make sure I'm watching so I can see when they need it. It didn't really cause me any problems, like switching between courses or switching between heights. I think with Jenny, it definitely feels faster. I think she is a little bit faster. Debatably, she's quicker and has less air time at 20. So it definitely was a little bit felt faster. And so I feel like that's a little bit harder than the bigger air time and Whit, who's not as, like, he doesn't land and it coming immediately. Like, there's like a little bit more lag time there. But like I said, I don't feel like it, but at least this time, I don't feel like it caused me any big problems at the Open. Actually, it did cause me one problem. That's not true. In snooker, I screwed her up in snooker because of that exact thing. I had like a feeling of how this one part of the course was going to go. And I kind of decided late on what I was going to do. And was doing a blind cross and I was so late because I think I had a feeling for what Whit would do, and it was so much faster because it was a soft turn where he doesn't turn well, and she turned so well that I was like, I watched my video and I was like, what the heck was I thinking? I was so late because she came so fast, and I was just like, do on soft turns I have an hour because Whit takes forever to come back on them. But that was one of the runs that I was not as focused on because it didn't count for team, and there's so many runs. It's like you can only really be so on for so many, especially with 2 dogs. So I kind of let that one fall in the priority list, and it definitely caught me because of that. But I do think it was because of how it felt different with Whit, and I think I did it with him in a different ring too. So I think it was actually all those things. It did get me that one place where, like I said, he has more airtime, slower to come back on a soft turn, and I did not account properly, and so was very late for poor Jenny on that one. But other than that, I think I had an okay time with it.
So how do you attack the training aspect of 2 different heights, like, or and also kind of trialing up until the event? Like, when are you like, I'm not doing any at this height for the next, X number of weeks because, or whatever, like, what is your strategy there?
It actually, I really was kind of stressed about it with Jenny because she's if she has a weakness, it's jumping 24, especially the slices. Like, there's so many hard slices, and she will often hit a bar when we do our ISCs, and she does UKI at 24. So at our ISCs, when she competes in ISC, often I'll have a bar, and I would say half to 2/3 of our runs. And like when I'm doing those, I'm not prepping, like, making it my ultimate priority that she doesn't hit one, because I don't want to do so much 24 because I don't want to be doing too much on her body. But I was worried about it this time because I think EO team this year was probably my biggest priority with her, or one of my bigger. I really wanted to make the EO team with her. And I wanted to make the WAO team too. I really wanted to do EO. So I was like, oh, I'm going to do like 15 runs at 20 2 weeks before I have to do my 4 really important runs at 24. And so I wasn't sure how it was going to go. And I had a strategy, and I guess you could say it worked because she did not hit a single bar, which I was shocked by at EO tryouts. But I trained her at 24 all the way up until the Open. I don't think we showed, I think we had a couple of ISC shows. We didn't have that much local showing. So I really only showed her at 24. And if I did, it was like maybe 2 or 3 days in the month or 2 prior. And then we did 20 for the Open, and she doesn't have any trouble going from 24 to 20, which some dogs I think can. And then when we got home, I was like, well, she needs a break. So really, I wished I could have just given her 2 weeks off. But of course I couldn't because we had 2 weeks before the next big event. So I gave her a couple of days off, and then I went back to some like kind of hardcore jump training at 24. And then on our weekend off in between, I really did not want to do agility, but I ended up entering a day of local AKC, and I put her at 24C. And it was a judge who I really like, who has good spacing. I wasn't going to like torture her with something that was too tight for 24. But I took her, and I just went with the thought of, reminding her that the bars are going to be higher, and just reminding her job at 24. And she hit a bunch. And so we did some fix and go. And by the last run, I think I just did 3 runs. She did not hit anything. And it felt like she was like, oh, right, I actually have to jump and use my rear end now. And so then I felt a little bit more confident going into EO that she would remember how to do 24. And she did. And then of course we had the practice on Thursday, which I made sure that we signed up for. And she hit one I think she hit 2 in the practice. And I just, we have our protocol for if she hits a bar, and just, oh, you knocked it down, let's fix it. And in the practice, it's a little bit winging it. You don't get to walk it. So there's not going to be perfect handling. And I think with her ability at 24 and her experience at 24, she can't really do the winging at 24. I can kind of wing stuff with her at 20. But then when it came time for the real runs, I was not winging anything. And I made it my priority to help her as much as I possibly could especially with the slices. Like if there was a turn, I was making sure to cue it as early as possible. If it was something in between, I was trying to make sure I was just really on point with making sure she saw it coming as soon as possible. And she didn't hit anything. And I don't even think she like ticked anything. She had perfect jumping. And I think I think she was just happy that I was finally really trying to help her rather than a little bit testing her. Cause the AKC trial, of course, was a test. Like, hey, are you going to notice the bars are bigger? And the practice was kind of like, hey, the bars are bigger and we're doing these things. And then I think this is what's cool about Jenny is she kind of can match my intensity. And when I am like up and focused, she seems like she's better. And she seems like she's just more with it and more accurate and more, I don't know. It just feels like she's with me and she's like on the same page. So I was like, it's important. And she was like, okay, it's important. I got it. And she kept them all up. So that's kind of what I did. And I guess it worked this time. I don't know that I'll say, oh, this will work every time, but I was able to help her enough in those 2 weeks to get her back to 24. So
that's awesome. What is it? Can you describe your protocol that you said you have a protocol for when she drops a bar?
We tell them, we say, oops, you knocked it down. So we're just marking it in the moment and trying to, we're a little bit experimenting with, can dogs learn, like, they can learn different reward markers. Can they learn different, no reward markers? Like we're stopping because you knocked it down. I don't know that they know, but we try to be consistent about that just to make sure that they don't know, like, cause they could have, maybe I wanted the backside and she went to the front side, or maybe like there's so many things that they could perceive the correction for. Right. And so we're trying to make sure if we're going to stop them for a bar, they know why, because otherwise it's going to cause them a little bit of stress and to not know how to fix the problem because they don't know what the problem is. So we just stop, we say, oops, you knocked it down, and then reset the bar and then just ask them to do it again. And then either continue, which they find reinforcing, or reward them if I think it's something that there's like a jumping effort that they might not actually know how to do, if it's something they're still learning versus them just being sloppy or rushing or whatever else it might be. But that's really all. Yeah.
Excellent. So, we've talked about Jenny, we've talked about Wit, and of course, JessicaAju has Hallelujah, and they're all related.
Yes.
So tell us how they're related. Just go ahead and tell us how they're related first.
So Lou and Wit are brother and sister, and Lou is Hallelujah, and she is Jenny's mother. So Wit and Jenny are niece and uncle. And so, did you do the breeding that produced Hallelujah and Wit, or no? We were really involved in it. We didn't actually whelp the litter, but a good friend of ours, my dog Verb is the sire of that litter. So we kind of facilitated the breeding and were involved with it. But like I said, we weren't the technical breeders, just involved stud owner.
But then Jenny is a Lou daughter, and so a Wit niece. And so then that litter, you did whelp yourself, right?
Yes, that was a Lou's COVID project. We were able to breed her just because of the pandemic. It was like during a time where she would have been competing at a couple different world teams, and because we weren't going, we had the opportunity, and that produced Jenny, and also Jess's dog Empowered.
And so then tell us, I guess, about breeding, like how you approach it, or it sounds like for you guys, it's very much, it's not like you produce very many breedings, right?
Yeah, we really only breed when we need a puppy, or if something comes up, like I have, I bred Verb had a couple litters, and Wit has had a couple of litters, and I really only agree to breedings that I think would be something that I would want a puppy from, or I would want a puppy from that cross later on, just to kind of keep the line going and making sure that we have access so that we can continue having dogs related, because we really do like them and they work for us. I think once you find a sort of type of dog, a breed, or even just a line that you mesh well with, it's easy to stick with it because it works for you. And so we really only breed if it's going to benefit. Either we need a puppy now, or we might want a puppy later from that cross, because I find breeding very stressful. I don't want to be doing it too much, and I feel very attached to all my puppies and even my stud dogs' puppies, and so it's hard to have too many out there because it stresses me out.
So for Jenny, for instance, like you are the breeder, so you can take credit on that side. You're also the trainer, so you can take credit on that side. So I feel like you can give a very honest assessment of how much is like nature versus nurture with her. Since you're responsible for all of it, you can give yourself 100% credit, but like, how do you apportion that credit?
Well, I mean, I think it's really both. It's like Jenny is amazing. I mean, I think Lou is amazing also. They're very athletic, they're very fast, they're very, very game and want to do it. But there are things about them that are not easy. I think like there's certain qualities, and they've come down. Like Verb had some of the qualities, Wit doesn't really, but Lou does and Jenny does, where you kind of have to understand them in order to know how to train them best. And that's not to say we are not going to improve in understanding them better, but they do certain things that we kind of at this point know how to react to and how to nurture and how to help them along. So I do think it's like the ultimate potential of them is very great, but I don't think that I do think that like, I'm not trying to, I think they are amazing dogs, but they're not always super easy to train, especially if the behaviors that they're exhibiting are sort of foreign to somebody. So, like I said, we're used to it, and we know what it is, and we know how to react. So we're able to kind of get the most out of them, and get the most out of them, I think, quicker than maybe someone who hadn't had a dog like that before. So I mean, Jenny is pretty young for being. Not that she's so great. I hate to say, oh, she's so great, but I do.
She is so great. I'll say it. She's so great. She's amazing.
And I will second it.
Great. I mean, everyone who knows me knows I'm obsessed with Jenny, but
Blue girls for the win.
Yes. But I kind of just get her. And it's like partially that I just get her. And it's also that I know Lou, and I know Verb, and I know Wit, and I know they're, all these dogs related, and I can adjust. There's not like, with dog training, there's a lot of trial and error. And I think there's less error because there's been so much trial with the other dogs. So now I'm like, oh, they did this. I know what to do. I can fix it quickly, or I can help them quickly. And so it's lucky for her, honestly. And even Goose, my first dog who wasn't related, she has some tendencies that he had. And I made a lot of mistakes, as anyone with their first border collie or first agility dog will do. And I'm not making them with her because I've been through that, and I learned through him how to do, a dog who's difficult with stay and not great impulse control and really anticipating and how to kind of just work around that. And because I was aware, I was able to prevent any of those things from becoming problems that had to be fixed. It was like fixed before started type of thing. But
I can relate to that a lot because I own Bee's father, and my mom owns Bee's mother. So like I've been around those dogs. I know those dogs, and Bee was not Swift's first litter. So I got to see those litters. Actually, Abby has a puppy from Swift's first litter. So by the time I got Bee, it was very similar. I kind of like, I knew what tendencies had or what behaviors had a tendency to go what direction. So when you see it right away, you're like, okay, I know where this is going, and you can kind of address it and work through it quicker than maybe somebody who has never seen that before, and therefore they don't know how to react. So I totally feel you on that one.
Yeah, that's very similar.
Awesome. All right. So as we bring this to a close, I wanted to get some advice from the great Perry DeWitt for some different groups of handlers. So first, give us any piece of agility advice. It could be training, it could be handling, it could be mental for like your novice, open, maybe first time handlers. So kind of beginners to the sport.
I feel like my advice to beginners is to, for one, ask questions, but find somebody that you feel comfortable with as an instructor. I think if you're training with somebody who you're not afraid to ask questions to, and that you feel like, and you're never like, I think beginners are often overfaced, and I think the sport is really, really hard. And if you're not working with somebody who you're comfortable with, then there's always going to be this extra degree of stress. And I feel like the sport is already so stressful that if you find that you're feeling really stressed in class or in your lessons or whatever, I would advise to see if you can find someone who you feel more comfortable with, because I think that's that's when you're going to be able to relax and learn and grow the most. I think stress is really hinders learning from dogs and people. And so like whatever you need to do to make yourself feel less worried, maybe it means doing some online stuff before you go into a group class. Maybe it means just, trying a bunch of different facilities before you kind of commit to one or the other place. And I think try to ask your instructor to break it down for you more if you need to. I think, like I said, I think beginners are often overfaced and you can't learn if there's 10 things that are new at the same time. You really need one thing at a time. And some people can progress quicker than others, and it doesn't really matter what type of person or what type of learner you are. You just have to find the right fit, and that's how you can start to really grow.
Fantastic. All right. Now, second group of people are people that want to be you, people that want to dominate. They want to win. They want to go to the big events. They want to compete internationally. What is kind of a piece of advice that you have for them along their journey?
It kind of goes to the same as the other question. I mean, it's not, I think people when they start to be successful, they start to feel like they know, and they stop asking questions, and they stop seeking help. So I think even if you are at the top of the sport, and even if you're doing well at big events and all that, you still have more to learn, and there's still somebody that can help you. So if you're struggling with something, ask for help. Try to find a class online, try to find, rather than struggling through with something that someone else might be able to help you with. I think that's how you can kind of expedite your progress and continue to grow and continue to get better. I think you have to keep learning and kind of stay humble. Don't think you know everything, because the more you know, the more you realize you don't know anything. So just keep an open mind and try to keep learning. There's always more to learn.
Yeah. When I think about some of the most dominant people in the sport right now, I think of you, and I think of Jessica, and I think of Jen. And like one thing that I think that you all have in common is like an incredible humility, just an incredible attitude towards the sport. Right. And so I think that is not a coincidence, right? It is that openness to continuing to learn, to continuing to improve, and to not think that you have all the answers, that lets you be actually some of the most absolute accomplished handlers in the world. So, congratulations to all of you on everything that y'all have been doing. And I think with that, we will wrap up this podcast. It's been fantastic talking to you, Perry. Love having you on the podcast again. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun.
And that's it for this week's podcast. We'd like to thank our sponsor, hititboard.com. Happy training.
Thank you for listening to Bad Dog Agility. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information, updates, and links to all our socials, just check out our website, www.baddogagility.com. If you haven't already signed up for our email subscription, we would love to have you join the BDA community. Until next time, take care.